Hello there, and welcome to Andre's Artist Profile. And today I'm going to be profiling the solo career of Mr. Paul Simon. Now, the majority of people who know Paul Simon by his hits probably have this misconception, as I did actually until I was about 21, 22 years old, that Paul Simon's solo career began after Simon and Garfunkel broke up. Now, I know that they actually recorded a solo album, Simon and Garfunkel, in 1964, which actually was not a hit album. But after that, what happened is that Paul Simon traveled over to England, where he recorded this album, You See Here, and it was reissued, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000s on CD, and it was called the Paul Simon Songbook. Um, This is actually a 2004 reissue. Some of the songs on this album were ones that became very, very famous for him. The Sound of Silence is on here, and I Am a Rock. Now, this is an all-acoustic album that he recorded, okay? So those aren't the versions that we commonly associate with Paul Simon. Anyway, that's his first album, Paul Simon's Songbook, from 1965. Now, we flash forward more than half a decade to Paul Simon. This is probably the first Paul Simon solo album a lot of people know. Now, it has Mother and Child Reunion. It has Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. He embraces, already on this album, he embraces a lot of Afro-Latin rhythms. That's one of the things I always loved about Paul Simon, the genuine embrace of Afro Latin rhythms. It went really well with his songwriting and vocal style. And he has another song on here called Blues for Harpo, which is really nice. Funky. Get a strong groove to it, you know. A little different than Simon and Garfunkel, but you could hear on even Cecilia that Paul Simon was moving that way. Yeah, there's Paul at that time. Hello. Okay, you open up the album and there's the inside. Okay. Now here's his, well, I was going to say second. Okay, there I go. His third solo album, actually, called There Goes Ryman Simon. I love this album. Now, if you didn't hear the R&B influences on that first one, it's all here, all for the taking. Now, this album came out in 1973, and of course, he brought in the Dixie Hummingbirds on this album for Love Me Like a Rock. This is just a really, really, there's the back of that album. This is just a really, really amazing album. This contains the original version of Take Me Out to the Mardi Gras, which Bob James later covered. And his drum break for that, Bob James's drum break for that, became a huge foundation of early hip-hop DJing. But anyway, I digress. So even Paul Simon's influence was heard through other artists' interpretation of his music. So already, he was essentially the great American songwriter, as they call him, at this point anyway. I mean, I'm not saying he was the greatest American songwriter. I mean, even Paul Simon will probably tell you, you know, with the Stevie Wonders and the Nat King Coles and all the other people. Anyway, so in 1975... there's a live album in between those two called Live Ryman. But this album came out in 1975, still crazy after all these years. That was a big hit for him, along with 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. During this time, Paul began to tour with a band called Stuff, a jazz funk band very similar to the Crusaders. His compositions on here all have a real strong groove. And this is just a fantastic album. Kind of a mega hit for Paul. But, you know, this is a great, great, awesome record. This next album came out in, I believe it was in 1980. One Trick Pony. Now, this is a soundtrack for a film that Paul Simon starred in. I think you can get it on DVD every now and then. Now, this movie was basically a semi-autobiography of Paul, a musician dealing with fatherhood and different things. This album features members of Stuff, and this is an amazing Afro-Latin jazz funk album. Okay, I'll say it. It's a great jazz funk album. Actually, it's one of my favorite of Paul Simon's. It's where he really starts embracing the sound that inevitably led to another album that I will get to later, but hint, African. Okay. The next album came out in 1983 called Hearts and Bones. This album is a little bit more like Still Crazy After All These Years, but musically it reveals itself a little bit slower. It's not a lot of people's favorite album by him, but Paul Simon usually comes out with something really interesting. Never one to rest too much on his laurels. But as for One Trick Pony, that inevitably led to Graceland, a full embrace, obviously, of South African rhythms. This album actually had a classic album series made about it, documentary. This album, Graceland, was hugely popular on this album. He had Ladysmith Black Mambazo singing with him and all that. Very authenticated. And there was a big hit with You Can Call Me Al. And this started kind of a whole thing of, African rhythms with, folk, pop, rock songwriting or whatever. Okay. Now, he continues basically on a track similar to that with The Rhythm of the Saints. I remember when this album came out really well. And this is a fantastic record, too. Right on a par with Graceland. It's one of his classics. Now, this one I haven't actually heard yet. Songs from the Cape Man. I got this at a place called Edge Video, and I heard that this album actually embraced a harder edge lyric and, vocal style for him or whatever. Came out in 1997. I know there's some gaps there, but it's going to be a big one coming up soon because there's a solo album in between it. But this is Paul Simon's latest. So Beautiful or So What? Really good album, actually, from 2011. I suppose one could say that it's similar to One Trick Pony in some ways, but it's just really solid and good songwriting. So, anyway, that's what I've got from Paul Simon. Now, sorry about that. I don't know whether or not he's going to be recording any new music in the future. I hope he does. I mean, to be quite honest, I think that in many ways, even though Bob Dylan is more critically acclaimed, I think that Paul Simon might actually have a more, shall I say, popularly acceptable sound than maybe Dylan even did. Okay, I'm not judging the two artists, but I think in a lot of ways, Paul Simon's considered a lot less controversial. And I think even though he's a very, very renowned person, I think his music is underrated. I really do. I mean, Simon and Garfunkel are comparable, but Paul Simon alone definitely had his place. And I know people say, oh, he overshadowed Art Garfunkel, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't take anything away from this amazing songwriter. So happy birthday, Paul Simon. And to those of you who admire his music, enjoy the video. See you next time.